Whatever it takes. A rallying cry of countless frustrated Canadian teens who tuned into their favorite low-budget teen drama from the Great White North. If you head up to the land of syrup and maple leaves, I imagine it would be pretty hard to find someone who hasn't at least heard of the iconic teen drama series, Degrassi. If you grew up in the US in the 2000s or 2010s, it's likely that you are familiar with the show in some capacity. Degrassi: The Next Generation aired in primetime slots on T-Nick, later renamed The N, a Nickelodeon subsidiary channel aimed towards a more mature audience of teens and young adults, while also airing simultaneously on CTV and eventually Much Music in Canada. The show became popular in the US for its colorful and diverse cast of characters, but as the series progressed, it became known mostly for one thing and one thing only: drama. If you ask the average person on the internet what they think Degrassi is, they'd probably tell you that it was an overdramatic teen soap that aired in the early 2000s and had Drake in it for some reason. To most Americans and people outside of Canada, that's really all it was: a fun, dramatic, and relatively low-budget after-school special meant to relate to the youths of today. What they most likely wouldn't know is that Degrassi is a show of generational importance. One whose influence has impacted the landscape of television in massive ways, and continues to do so even to this day. Saved by the Bell, 90210, 13 Reasons Why, and Sex Education? None of these shows would exist in their current form if Degrassi hadn't done it first. And in my opinion, done it best. But this is just referring to Degrassi's impact on the landscape of media and entertainment. That's not even scratching the surface on Degrassi's impact in Canada. Because more so than anywhere else, in Canada, Degrassi was huge.
I got so many,
and saw thousands of people there with some.
Degrassi became a cultural phenomenon in Canada. Everyone knew who these kids were. It had its own after show on primetime network television, just like The Walking Dead. The cast members would even get bullied in school for the things their characters did on the show. It was absolutely pervasive. So how did this thing that started as a modest project become such a huge deal? Enter Linda Schuyler. After earning her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Toronto, she became a school teacher and taught for 4 years at Earl Grey Senior Public High School in Toronto's East End. At the time, Schuyler felt that there wasn't enough media geared towards kids that actually portrayed the struggles of growing up for what it was. Instead of talking down to kids or showing everything through rose-colored glasses, Schuyler saw a need for media that portrayed the authentic situations and issues that kids and teens were experiencing at that time. This lit a fire under her, and while still teaching, she began to produce educational short films, which would eventually become the inspiration for Degrassi. In 1976, Schuyler partnered with Kit Hood, a former film editor with Walt Disney Productions in London, to found Playing with Time Inc., a production company which made short films and educational documentaries about the experience of young adults and teens growing up in and around Toronto. In 1979, they started producing The Kids of Degrassi Street, which became the blueprint for the future series. Degrassi follows the lives of kids and teens growing up on or near the titular Degrassi Street in Toronto, Ontario. The franchise spans 5 main series: The Kids of Degrassi Street, Degrassi Junior High, Degrassi: The Next Generation, and Degrassi Next Class, as well as several television specials and made-for-TV films. The early Degrassi series were produced by Playing with Time Inc., Linda Schuyler and Kit Hood's production company. Degrassi: The Next Generation was produced by Epitome Pictures and originally premiered on CTV in 2001. It also aired simultaneously on Teen Nick and Nickelodeon in the United States. The Next Generation, eventually nicknamed Degrassi TNG, aired from 2001 to 2015, spanning 14 seasons in total before its untimely cancellation. Degrassi Next Class was a direct follow-up to The Next Generation, and was jointly produced by Epitome Pictures and Netflix. The series premiered on January 4th, 2016 on Family Channel's F2N program block in Canada, and was distributed internationally by Netflix shortly thereafter. Although an ending to Next Class was never officially announced, there have been no announcements of any additional seasons, episodes, or spin-off films since the end of its 4th season in 2017. It's safe to say that, for now, this series spanning 30 years has finally come to an end. So, at this point you might be thinking, Chip, you're a grown-ass man. What in the hell are you doing talking about and analyzing a teen drama series that is meant to appeal primarily to middle school girls? Well, the truth is, when I was just an awkward little chimp moving from middle school to high school, I was living a pretty sheltered life, and I didn't really have a whole lot going on. I grew up in a very religious environment, so there were quite a few things I was exposed to much later than my peers. I didn't have a lot of people in my life at the time with backgrounds and circumstances that were vastly different from my own. One day after school, I found myself tuning in to Nickelodeon, where I stumbled upon a show I wasn't familiar with. It didn't have a corny laugh track or a bunch of characters stumbling into wacky hijinks on a low-budget set. It was a grounded setting with a diverse ensemble cast, filmed in what appeared to be a real-ass school. Many of the kids on the show didn't look like traditional actors. They looked like real people with various different body types and ethnic backgrounds. They didn't have the charisma of professional actors or the tendency to overperform for comedic effect. They were awkward, they had braces and awful haircuts and shitty makeup. They were cringy and embarrassing, like any kid their age would be. Which, to me, made them all the more adorable and endearing. After watching a few episodes, it became pretty clear that this show wasn't meant to score cheap laughs through goofy hijinks like the other live-action Nickelodeon shows I had been exposed to. Instead, it was navigating situations that were very personal to the characters, while exploring the whole range of the human experience. Watching characters struggle with existential crisis and personal identity, love, loss, divorce, and even death, all while trying to get their schoolwork in on time, connected with me in a big way. It was clear that this show was different, and boy was it a breath of fresh air. Now, keep in mind, I hadn't seen a lot of good TV at this point in my young life, so I didn't have much to compare it to. But Degrassi for me was more than just a show. It was a window into a world of perspectives and issues that I wasn't necessarily familiar with or hadn't experienced personally. And through that window, Degrassi helped me become a more empathetic person. A lot of people look down on Degrassi due to the nature of it feeling like a low-budget after-school special. It's chock full of cringy child acting, drop plot lines, and many moments of melodrama sprinkled throughout. These things definitely put me off to the show at first too, but as I continued to watch, I slowly became more and more attached to certain characters. Even if I couldn't personally relate to every character on the show, there were always a few characters that I would get attached to, and that's what kept me interested and kept me watching. In the end, after going back and watching all of the shows in order from the start, I can happily say that even if I don't love every main character in this huge ensemble cast, I can appreciate what they were going for with each and every one. They are all unique in some way and undergo some interesting development between the introduction of their character and when they exit the series. I also came to appreciate the more low-budget elements of the show. Instead of producing a glossy product glamorizing the high school experience like many of the shows to follow would, Degrassi reveled in its awkwardness. The vast majority of actors hired for the show were the same age as the characters they were portraying, and for most of them, this was their first acting role ever. Although the show's production value and editing improves over its nearly 3-decade-long runtime, the producers always maintained that they wanted to give young local actors the available roles, as opposed to glossed-up Hollywood starlets. In fact, one of my favorite production stories comes from when Spelling TV, the company that would later go on to produce the original Beverly Hills 90210, offered to buy Degrassi High and produce the show in LA. but Linda Schuyler and the folks from Playing with Time decided to turn down the offer. To them, Degrassi was a uniquely Canadian institution. It was set in Canada, filmed in Canada, and used real Canadian kids as actors. Schuyler and the producers firmly believed that if the show was no longer produced in Canada, it would lose the grounded perspective that made it special, and I respect them immensely for not bending to studio pressure and continuing to make the show the way they envisioned it. More than anything else, I appreciate Degrassi as a franchise for being willing to tackle difficult subject matter that is true to the experience of growing up, in a way that is entertaining while still feeling authentic. As we go through the show together, you'll see just how many elements of the show would most likely not make it to air today. It's really impressive that they were able to capture so many perspectives in a single show, while also being educational and entertaining. Degrassi isn't afraid to get dark and bleak at times, and that's how it has earned its catchphrase during the initial run of The Next Generation. Degrassi, it goes there. And go there we shall! On screen now is the breakdown of the schedule for how I will be covering Degrassi. We're going to go through the show in chronological order, starting with Degrassi in the 80s. The first episode of Forgotten Favorites will cover the kids of Degrassi Street and Degrassi Junior High in full. The second episode will cover all of Degrassi High, and the third episode will cover the TV movie Degrassi School's Out. After that, we'll be covering each season of Degrassi The Next Generation, one season per video. I will generally try to release one new episode of Forgotten Favorites per month. There may be some months where I don't release a Forgotten Favorites episode because I'm working on another video. To keep up to date with the channel's schedule, consider subscribing to my Patreon for as little as $1. I've been Chimpanzee, and whatever it takes, I know we can make it through.